Greetings all, Raphael X here with another video. Subscribe, click on the like button, the notification button, leave a comment, share this video, and all that stuff. All right, without further ado, let us start with a quick prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patris, Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sic ut erat in principio et nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. Ave Maria, sede sapientiae, ora pro nobis in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. All right, praise to the Blessed Trinity, 3 in 1. God does not have the imperfection of being alone, nor does he have the imperfection of being a plurality. So he is 1 in nature and 3 in person. Yes, very important. And interestingly, when the Christians were first persecuted, they were accused of being atheists because they didn't believe in many gods. They believed in one God. And by the Muslims, they're accused of being polytheists because the Muslims think we believe many gods, but no. So usually when you're accused by two extremes, right, you're doing something well. So I do want to talk about a recent phenomenon that on the general level, Muslims are converting to Christianity, yes. But there are some instances where Orthodox Christians are converting to Islam. And there's a famous example of an Orthodox priest, I believe he's from Wisconsin, who is very devout, very well known, who just announced he's becoming Muslim. So we're seeing this with the Orthodox community more than other Christian communities converting to Islam. Which Christians convert to Islam? Those from the Orthodox community. And I want to mention 2 points with you. Well, first of all, I want to show you, I want to talk about why that is, but I want to show you some certain articles. And I Googled it, and there's a lot of, here, let me get out of the Zoom. And you can just Google it, latest Orthodox priest converts to Islam, and you see this. You see a lot of this, where Russian priests convert to Islam, 600 priests convert to Islam, Orthodox priests become Muslim, Russian priests. And it's interesting because it's a lot within the Russian Orthodox Church, and we'll say why. There's other sites here that are known Orthodox sites. This one, for example, the Public Orthodoxy, Islam from an Orthodox perspective. So they themselves talk about the relationships, which again, I'll talk about, mentioning 2 points. There's another one, Orthodoxy in Dialogue. It talks about the Prophet Muhammad's affection for Christians, which is totally false. I mean, even the Quran, right, I believe it's in the Jihad chapter 9, talks about, right, persecuting the people of the book. So this is absolutely absurd, and history says otherwise. Just read any contemporary biographer of Muhammad. And then we have, for some reason I can't access it here. Here we go. And then we have another known Orthodox Christianity. These through the heart and mind of a convert to Orthodox Christianity. So, it's to Orthodox. How is Orthodoxy Christianity different from Islam? So there's a lot of interesting works here on that. But I do want to mention 2 points that I think are important. This is why the Orthodox or any Christian who converts to Islam, the majority of them are Orthodox. Why is that? Because Orthodoxy shares a principle. They're in the social realm, right? Christians don't even have this developed. Catholicism is very well developed, that there's a clear separation between the civil, the state, the natural, and the supernatural society, the church. There's a clear distinction. The entire history of the church, read the history of the church. As Catholics, we should know the history of the church. The entire history of the church is precisely the church defending their rights from the state. State is a modern term, but from we could say the civil realm, right, the natural realm. But let's just use the state. The church defending their rights from the state, and the state defending their rights from the church, because the church also, right, they intruded in on the rights of the state. The entire church, that's the entire church history. So there is, not the modern way of understanding it, But there is a separation of church and state within Catholicism. They've always defended the true separation. That doesn't mean there's not a collaboration, as Boniface the Eighth, the Pope, one of the last great popes of his time, Boniface, who wrote the bull Unam Sanctam, which I'm going to share right now. He said, right here, is a very important bull. You should read this, written in 1302. Again, one of the great popes of the 13th century, transitioning to the 14th century, and then we're going to have not so good popes after that. But he says here, however, one sword ought to be subordinated to the other in temporal authority, subjected to spiritual power. For since the apostle said there is no power except from God, and the things that are ordained from God, Romans 13, 1 through 2, but they would not be ordained if one sword were not subordinated to the other, and if the inferior one, as it were not led upwards by the other. So he's talking about the civil sword, right? And this temporal sword, civil sword, and the spiritual sword. That's an important distinction. So there is a collaboration between church and state. The church has the ultimate goal, salvation of souls, and the society does also. And society has to subject, let's say, its purely natural goal to the church's goal of salvation of souls, right? So the state has to be in collaboration with the church. Laws have to be animated by the Christian spirit, truly interpreted by the church, which is the mystical body of Christ. So that is very important. Collaboration, but not identification. And in Orthodoxy, especially in Russian Orthodoxy, there's a close, almost identification of state and church. Right, the Russian patriarch is very much in state matters, and state matters very much influence the Russian patriarch. There's a very close collaboration, and there's a practical, at least practical identification. We see this in Russia, where if Putin doesn't like something, or God forbid that the Russian patriarch contradicts, right, the president, right, Putin in this case. So there is a very close identification there, a very close collaboration. Now, much closer in Islam. Islam is an actual theocracy. It is Sharia law, which runs civil society, is an essential part of Islam. So there is no separation at all in Islam. So that makes it easier for Orthodox to go into Islam, because they have this notion of, right, they don't have, they lack this notion of a clear distinction between the natural order and with its institution, and the supernatural order with its institution. Excuse me. That's one point. Another point is, of course, we have to be essentially traditional, but when we become hyper traditionalists, when we hyper focus on orthodoxy, on the correct teachings, there could be a diminishing of charity, of love. That's true. Obviously, we can very much focus on tradition, very much focus on doctrine, and that ought to be the basis of our charity. Like Benedict XVI said, we need orthodoxy, correct teaching, or orthopraxis, correct practice. That's Catholic teaching. So the doctrine, in order to live the charitable life, that's the ultimate goal for all Christians. The only way we're saved. But if there's too much of a disordered focus on tradition, where you're totally adamant and you're really hardened in matters that can possibly change and evolve, but absolutely no evolution at all. Like, for example, the Orthodox don't believe in anything past the Fourth Council. It's just the Council of Chalcedon. They just have the Fourth Councils, and that's it. There's no theological development. So if there's this rigid traditionalism, this rigid orthodoxy, which is in the end is not orthodoxy, this relates very much with Islam, which Islam tries to defend a purity of their beliefs without any charity. Again, it's very clear in Islam. And because Islam has these extreme the extreme view in this and in the other point I mentioned, Orthodox Christians can be more attracted to Islam. They're essentially closer in these ideas. So I think those 2 points are really important. This hyper focus on orthodoxy was the second point, and the first point is this lack of distinction between the supernatural order with its institutions and the natural order with its institutions, culminating into a theocracy like we see in Islam. So this is a huge problem. All right, so that's why it's very important to have to be truly orthodox in the sense that everything's in its place, right? And this is what we do in the Catholic Church. This is truly Catholicism. Now I know, the hierarchy, the leaders are not being the best models, right, for everyone. Some people are leaving the church because of that, but no, stay in the church. The church is the mystical body of Christ, the Holy Catholic Church. It is the same Christ. It is Christ on earth. It is the church that Christ founded. And with that, we'll leave it. And so God bless you all. And until next time, we'll see each other. Take care and God bless. Bye now.